Hi everyone, my name is Anton Smith and I am a staff support engineer here at GitLab. And today we will be going through a deep dive on the Jira integrations. Now, for those of you that are watching this in the future, do take note that this was recorded in GitLab 17.1.0 and the current date is the 26th of June 2024. Okay, so just to start, we have a few objectives that I'd like to cover off today, and hopefully they align with some of the things that you would like to know as well. So, we have this thing called Jira. What is Jira? What integrations does GitLab offer that hook up with Jira? How do I set up the Jira issue integration? How do I set up the GitLab for Jira Cloud app? And, as a support engineer or as a user, how can I troubleshoot common Jira integration issues? So those are all things that we'll be covering off today. Okay, so let's start off with, the obvious question, what is Jira? So the way I like to think of Jira is if we start off with GitLab, because we all know GitLab. GitLab has an issue tracker that is available as part of every project. And, the ideal GitLab flow, as we call it, you would create an issue if there's a bug, you would collaborate with your peers towards a fix, a merge request is opened, that merge request is then merged into the default branch, issue closed. Jira is essentially just that. It's a project management tool that encompasses both issues and epics, just like GitLab. And it's just used for tracking a whole myriad of different things. So very similar to how the GitLab issue and epic functionality works. It's also important to note that Jira does offer some additional functionality that GitLab currently doesn't. So that's why some of our customers and users prefer to use Jira. So one example is, and it's by no means an exhaustive list. So Jira issues can have states, and you can have a state like issues in progress, or it's completed, or whatnot, and those are customizable. So when a state is changed, it could trigger a transition, and that transition can be an automated task like open up another issue or open up a branch or whatnot. So it's a very powerful tool. Some things to note is just like GitLab, there are different distribution methods for Jira. So it is available as a SaaS service called Jira Cloud. And an easy way to identify those instances is the domain always ends with .atlassian.net. And then, of course, we have Jira Server and Data Center, which is the self-managed version that customers can host on-prem or on their own providers. So, yes. Now, we do offer two different integrations that work with Jira here at GitLab. Now, just before we begin, we should note that most of the Jira functionality that GitLab offers is owned by the Import and Integrate group. And they are a lovely bunch of people. And of course, we've got all the functionality is available for free in the free tier. So there are some notable exceptions that we will go through in the latest slides. Okay, so the Jira issue integration is probably the easiest integration to get set up and working and running with. So if you've never seen Jira before, we've got a screenshot of a typical Jira issue here. So for those that are eagle-eyed, it looks pretty similar to what a GitLab issue looks like. Interface, of course, is a bit different. Now, we've got these two UI elements here. So we've got web links, and this is the comments pane. And these are the two things that the Jira issue integration will update. When you configure the Jira issue integration, this is typically done either at the instance, group, or project level. But for obvious reasons on SaaS, you can only do it at the group and project level. Now, in order to actually send an update to Jira, and assuming that you have the issue integration enabled, you would mention a Jira issue ID. Now, the Jira issue ID is a combination of the issue number and the project key. So we can see in this screenshot where my mouse is hovering. Well, I'm not sure if you can actually see my mouse hovering. So there's a DD-1 in the breadcrumbs, and DD-1 is the issue of the Jira project ID there. So let's say we want that update to come into Jira. We could use a commit message, for example. So on a commit message, we could compose DD-1, this is a commit, just like in this red box at the top. And once that is committed and pushed into GitLab, GitLab will then send an update to Jira and instruct Jira, I want to add a web link, I want to add a comment, and then these updates appear in the Jira issue. Now, finally, I'd like to refer you to the feature availability page in our documentation. So I probably should have mentioned this a bit earlier. This is a really good table to refer to as support engineers, GitLab team members, and users on what our Jira functionality offers. And you know, it's quite common for users to use both integrations in tandem. If you're not sure which integration a user is currently using, it's definitely good to point them to this page to just clarify which integration they're working with, because otherwise it can get quickly confusing for both parties. So the Jira issue integration, we've looked at it at a very high level on what changes in the UI. But let's kind of talk about it from the back end a wee bit. So, you know, just as before, you specify a Jira issue ID somewhere in GitLab. So using the previous example, we had DD-1 as our Jira issue ID, and we're specifying that in a commit message. So as soon as we commit and push that up to GitLab, a worker will come along in Sidekick, and it will trigger the integrations, create external cross-reference worker. Try saying that fast. And basically this worker, if you follow the code, it will eventually call a REST API client within GitLab, and it will ping the Jira API with those updates. Now, all communication with the Jira issue integration is logged. So you should see any success and any error messages in the Sidekick integrations JSON log files. So we can go through those files later in the demo just to get you all familiar with those. Some other notable features that I want to mention with the issue integration. Now, we will be showcasing these in the demo as well. So the first one, we've got viewing Jira issues in GitLab. So this just allows you to, you know, as the name suggests, view a list of the issues in GitLab, and you can view specific issues and then navigate to them. So any problems pertaining to that you will see in the production JSON log, but newer versions of GitLab will show the actual error in the UI. And yes, that's only available to premium and ultimate customers. For Jira issues, you can actually create vulnerabilities. Oh, sorry, more or less, you can create Jira issues for vulnerabilities. And that is available for ultimate customers only. And basically, we have SAST and security jobs running in pipelines for our GitLab projects. They generate vulnerabilities in the vulnerability management dashboard. You go into there and you can click into a vulnerability, and I can show this later in the demo. You click on the Create Jira Issue button, and it creates a Jira issue automatically with all your vulnerability information all populated. So it's quite nice and easy, and it saves a bit of time. So yeah, that's really cool. It's owned by the Threat Insights group. So it's one of the notable exceptions where it isn't managed and maintained by the Import and Integrate group. That team is also quite a lovely bunch. So yeah, definitely reach out to them if you run into any issues there. But any issues, no, I shouldn't say issues, let's say errors. Any errors creating vulnerabilities should be present in the browser's developer tools. So I found the most success looking in the console tab or the network tab, and you should see something in the production JSON log file as well. Okay, so that is a very quick overview of the Jira issue integration. Now, this is probably the one that most customers use, the Jira development panel, and there are several flavors of this as such, but let's examine that in greater detail later. But at a very high level, we've got a screenshot of a typical Jira issue again, and you can see in the green box, so in the green box, we have this, and that is the development panel in Jira. So anytime you see in GitLab issues, Zendesk, or even in Atlassian documentation, you see a reference to the development panel. The green box in that screenshot is the development panel. Now, the red box you can see, that is actually the information that GitLab updates as part of this development panel integration that we offer. Now, the actual magic and the smarts behind that is done using the GitLab for Jira Cloud app. So that is available for customers that are using Jira Cloud. If a customer is using Jira Server, they would use the Jira DVCS connector. Now, as before with the Jira issue integration, it is triggered when a Jira issue ID is mentioned in GitLab. So if we think back to the previous example where we use the Jira issue ID DD-1, let's say I want to do it on a merge request. So in the screenshot, you can see I've got a web link merge request DD-1, add these changes back to me. So if I was to create a new MR with that name and hit save, GitLab will then send an update to Jira via the GitLab for Jira Cloud app, and it will then update the development panel in the red box. So you can see that we have one pull request that is currently open. Now, GitLab will actually send the MR status information to Jira. And of course, Jira uses the notion of pull request rather than merge request, but it's essentially the same thing. And I can show you once we're in and we've got something configured what this actually looks like. But it can link back to GitLab, which is actually fairly nice. As before, I've just added another link right at the very bottom. Refer to the feature availability chart for more details on the different feature parodies between the two integrations. Okay, so just a few things about the GitLab for Jira Cloud app. Now, as mentioned previously, it can only be used with Jira Cloud. So that's anything with .atlassian.net in the domain name. And the way this works is any project that is within a group that has been linked within the GitLab for Jira Cloud app is monitored by GitLab for changes and anything including a Jira issue ID. So the idea being you want to add all the groups as a group link to the GitLab for Jira Cloud app that you want monitored. And of course, as previously mentioned, once it detects a Jira issue ID in any of those things that it's monitoring, those updates are then triggered and sent to Jira. And finally, there are two different ways that you can install the GitLab for Jira Cloud app, just to add more confusion to the mix. Now, a lot of this is going to largely depend on the security considerations that users may have. And I won't click into this for now because there's quite a bit of detail in there, but it's very informative. But the main crux of it is each method is slightly different. Now, installing via the Atlassian marketplace is probably a nicer experience. But it does require that a shared Jira token is stored on GitLab.com, and that is used purely to facilitate the connection. I'll go into more detail on what that means later. Now, installing manually is a bit different. It's not installed from a marketplace. It's actually installed directly from the self-managed instance. So that's where the app comes from. And it's typically when users don't want to have a shared Jira token stored on GitLab.com, but it does require you to place Jira in a special development mode. So that could also be a deal breaker depending on the organization. So it's really up to users to select which install method suits them and their organization. But we can definitely help them through that process. I should also note that for both methods, you do have to meet certain prerequisites. So I've included links in here. We won't go through them just yet because we will cover them in the demo. Okay, here is another confusing part that you need to wrap your head around. When you install the GitLab for Jira Cloud app via the Atlassian Marketplace, part of the configuration will involve you setting up the Jira Connect proxy. Now, I probably just said a lot of things and that doesn't make much sense, but the shared token that we were just talking about needs to be stored on GitLab.com. And that is what the Jira Connect proxy does. So this is used primarily only when you are using a self-managed instance, installing via the Atlassian Marketplace. It facilitates the install and uninstall of the app on the self-managed instance. And, as previously mentioned, it stores that shared token. Later on, you'll notice that we will set up an OAuth application as part of installing the GitLab for Jira Cloud app. And those OAuth tokens are never shared with GitLab.com. So GitLab.com and the infra team that control it, they do not have access to any of the user data that's transmitted between the self-managed instance and Jira. So we've had some users concerned about that in the past, but yeah, there's just no way. We don't have any visibility into that, and neither do we want to have that visibility. The only thing we store is the shared token for Jira. Now, GitLab.com logs will contain events for the Jira Connect proxy, and there is a debugging Jira Connect proxy link there that you can review as well, but we will be following that in the demo that's coming up as well. So stay tuned. Okay, so just like the issue integration, let's just quickly go over how everything works in the back end. As before, we mention merge request with a Jira issue ID. So using the DD-1, it's going to be ingrained in all your minds by the end of this deep dive, DD-1. So we mentioned that in GitLab. Now, Sidekick will then trigger a worker depending on the change made. So we've got a whole bunch of them under the module name Jira Connect. For a merge request, it's going to trigger the sync merge request worker. Now, ultimately, all these workers will call this service, Jira Connect Sync Service. And this is what does all the magic and constructs the payload that is sent to the Jira API. And that will update the development panel for the respective Jira issue. Now, as before, all communication done during this process will be in the Sidekick and integration JSON log files. Okay. Now, we'll briefly go over the DVCS connector. We won't be actually doing a demo on the DVCS connector today. We've got David, who has kindly agreed to record a video going through that process at a later time. But yeah, just for the purposes of this deep dive, I just wanted to mention that. Now, the connector, the DVCS connector is developed and maintained by Atlassian. So it's not actually something that GitLab has written or controls. but it's something to be aware of while we're helping customers with DVCS related issues. Now, this connector is designed and can only be used with Jira Server and Data Center, and it works very similar to how the GitLab for Jira Cloud app works. So you need to add, it will give you an interface to add GitLab groups, and then you link those groups. Any projects within those groups are then monitored by, I guess, Jira or GitLab in this stage, and then any updates will be then triggered and sent to Jira. And finally, Atlassian have deprecated Jira Server, and they are moving their user base towards Jira Cloud. So I believe that will signify that we're going to see more customers moving towards the GitLab for Jira Cloud app and less users on the Jira DVCS connector. So yeah, something to keep in mind. All right, so here's all the fun stuff. You get to watch me set up stuff and break stuff. So some things to keep in mind for this demo that I've got for you today. We will be setting up the Jira issue integration. We will also be setting up the GitLab for Jira Cloud app with a self-managed instance. Preferably, I'm going to use the Atlassian Marketplace app. And if we have time, we'll look at doing the manual install method. I also want to artificially break the integration for both the issue integration and the GitLab for Jira Cloud app. So we can actually see what problems the customer may encounter and how you would approach fixing it. And hopefully you can incorporate this into your troubleshooting mechanisms moving forward. So let's give me a sec. All right, so if we go into, okay, so this is my self-managed instance right here. What I want to do is I'll put the documentation side by side so we can actually see what we're doing. And I've got a project here called Snap More Rails. Now, if you recall, I can configure the Jira integration at different levels, so instance, group, and project. But for the purposes of this demo, let's do it at the project level. So we can see that I have a cat. And what we can do is let's configure this. So this is my Atlassian Jira instance, and we need to put the web URL in there. Because we're using Jira Cloud, we use the basic auth method. Now, my username is just asmith@gitlab.com, and we need an API token for Jira Cloud. And yeah, they have really long API tokens for whatever reason. Now, we'll also enable a few other features while we're here. So the Jira issues and the Jira vulnerabilities. So my project key is Swift. So that's what this is right here. And I'll also enable the vulnerabilities at the same time. Okay, so that's all saved and active. Now for good measure, let's just test everything. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to create a file that specifies Jira issue ID. So we've got this issue here, Swift 28. So let's see if this triggers. Now, a couple of things you may notice, anything in the GitLab UI will actually recognize that it is a Jira issue ID, and it will link off to the Jira issue ID. And you'll see that the integration is working. We can see two things. We can see this web link that was just added, and we can see that this was just added as well. And all of these links, you should be able to see the link at the bottom left. It does link off back to the self-managed instance as well, which is really nice. Now, I just want to quickly show the Jira issues functionality. So we've got under plan Jira issues. So that is this documentation here. Now, you'll see that I've got a bunch of different Jira issues, and they go from Swift 28 to Swift 1, and it's essentially just this list here. So I'm reviewing the Jira issue list for Swift. And yeah, it's just showing this list in GitLab. Now, if I click into one, that's a bug. We'll have to look at that after. So we can see that it's actually pulled through that comment from the Jira issue here. I can click through into the Jira issue here as well. So this is just more of a quality of life feature, I would say, and I would expect. I haven't looked if they are developing this feature in greater detail, but it looks like it's still a work in progress. But nonetheless, it's still a nice little thing to have. The next thing I wanted to show real quick was creating a Jira issue for a vulnerability. Now, before this demo, I actually went ahead and I ran a pipeline so we could generate some vulnerabilities. And I always forget where to go for here. So secure vulnerability report. Okay. So we've got some vulnerabilities here that were picked up by the last pipeline. And if I was to click into one of these, we have a nice fancy button here that says create Jira issue. If I click it, voila, it creates a new issue. So Swift 28 was the previous Jira issue. Now we've got Swift 29. And it's, you can see it's just created an issue and it's populated all the great stuff from GitLab into here as well. So users and customers can continue tracking the vulnerability in Jira. So that's quite a nifty little feature as well. All right, I think that was everything for the issue integration. So let's go and set up the GitLab for Jira Cloud app now. So let's go to the relevant doc in here. So in the right side of my screen, I will be loading the instructions and we can go through the steps together. Okay, so for Jira Cloud, use the GitLab for Jira Cloud app. Okay, so the general landing page here is actually more directed towards how to use it for GitLab.com users. So if we're using self-managed, we need to click on this GitLab for Jira Cloud app administration and follow that doc instead. Now, there are quite a few steps that we need to do. The very first one is setting up the OAuth authentication. So let's do that right now. So go to admin area, select applications, select new application that needs to be updated. GitLab Jira Cloud app. Okay, so for the redirect URI, and this is a step that a lot of customers can get wrong. So it's always good to double check how they install the app, which is why we have these points here. If you're installing the app from the Atlassian Marketplace listing, enter gitlab.com. So that's what we will do because we're going to use the Atlassian Marketplace version. Clear the trusted and confidential boxes, select API, save the application. Cool. So next, at step 8, we need to copy that application ID and we need to plug it in to settings, general. We expand the GitLab Jira Cloud app and we plant that there. We save the changes. Okay, so that's the OAuth done. Okay, now we've got the Jira user requirements. So the Jira user that installs the GitLab for Jira Cloud app needs to have specific permissions applied to it. And we can see that we've got one of these requirements. They need to either be a member of org admins or site admins. So now we'll load it in this side. So if we go to admin.atlassian.com, we can see in my Atlassian workspace, if we go into directory, we've got just my user. We've got groups. Now I've got a site admins group, and that was there because I've got an older Atlassian workspace, but customers with newer Atlassian workspaces will have an org admins group. So if we click into the groups, we just have to make sure this user, in my case, me, whoever is installing the GitLab for Jira Cloud app is just in this group. Alexa, I'm in a meeting right now.
I don't know that one.
You should know. Okay, so while she figures that out, let me just refocus. Okay, so as long as we have a user that's under site admins or org admins, we should be all good to go. Okay. If neither of these groups exists, we've just got these instructions that the user could just add them themselves. It's no problem at all. I will point out, however, support for the org admins group was only introduced in 16.6. So yeah, just something to keep in mind that adding a user to org admins prior to 16.6 is not going to work. They will have to use the site admins group at that part. All right. So install the GitLab for Jira Cloud app from the Atlassian Marketplace. So there's some good information here that we are not going to read through, but we will read through the prerequisites. So the instance needs to be publicly available, which it is. I'm on 17.1, so the version's not a problem. We've just set up the OAuth authentication. We're using Let's Encrypt, so we don't have to worry about trusted cert issues. We're not using a reverse proxy, and we don't have any firewalls in place. We've already checked the user requirements, so we can continue. The next thing I need to do is actually set the Jira Connect proxy URL. So that instructs GitLab that we are using gitlab.com to store our shared Jira token. So that's just the screen here. Okay. Finally, link your instance. To link your instance, install the GitLab for Jira Cloud app. So let's do that over here. Okay, that's weird. Okay. Okay, so we can see on the bottom left, it's doing some secret stuff. And okay, now it's installed. So let's click the get started. Okay, so because I've previously installed the GitLab for Jira Cloud app, it is showing my other self-managed URL, but we won't be using that today. Generally, when you install the app for the first time, you're going to see a screen like this. And you have to select if you're using gitlab.com or if you're using self-managed. In this case, we're using self-managed. Now, we have a checklist here to go through the various steps that we just went through. And the reason for that being is some users may discover this application through the Atlassian Marketplace on their own, and they haven't come through the documentation. So they would have missed all the prerequisite steps. So that's the reason why we have this here. And because we've already done this, I'm just going to click through them all. Now we are going to grab the URL because that's what we need for the next step. Okay, sign in. Okay, so this is the OAuth at play, so we can see that it's requesting permission. It's requested permission, I'm now in, and now I just need to link groups. So at the moment, I only have one group called Snapmore. Now that's all linked. So we should be all good there. Okay, here we go. All right. Now what we can do is we could actually start making some changes in here. So let's create another file. And let's create a target branch of test. And we start a new merge request. And then using the issue from before, we've got Swift 28. Now, there are multiple ways to trigger the development panel integration. This is just one way of doing it. Okay. So you can see that the Jira development panel has updated with this branch called test because it knows it's linked to this Jira issue. The pull request also includes a link to the merge request. I should say it knows it's open. And this could also be used for other things as well. So if I was using pipelines, they should appear in here. If I was using environments in GitLab, they'll appear in here, feature flags, etc. Now, one of the more useful and more commonly used features is creating branches within the Jira development panel. So I can actually go, oh, where is it? I can click this plus sign to create a new branch and then click on this. Now, unfortunately, at the time of this recording, there is a bug where if you are using the Jira Connect proxy, it goes to gitlab.com instead of your self-managed instance. But there is a fix coming, hopefully in the next version of GitLab, that should resolve that. But you would normally see something like this, and it will let you select the project, and then it just creates a branch within your project. A pull request is something similar as well. It will just take you to this page in the self-managed instance. So that's quite a nice little feature to have. All right. We are getting a little short on time, so I don't think I'll have time to do the other install method here. But we can revisit that in a recorded video in the future, I would say. What I'd like to do is troubleshoot the Jira issue integration. So let's purposely do something and let's see if we can fix it. Now, for this example, it's going to be quite easy because the most common issue that I see with the issue integration is customers trying to post an update to an issue that does not exist. And that is by far the easiest thing to do in the time that we have. So give me a moment, sure. So what we can do, let's go Swift 80 because we know Swift 80 definitely doesn't exist. Okay, so from GitLab's perspective, we've just got a regular expression. So that's why it's still highlighting. But you can see it doesn't technically exist. Now, there are several ways that we can troubleshoot this, but assuming that we didn't know that the issue doesn't exist, how would you go about troubleshooting this? So I'm just going to jump ahead in the slides to just save me some time typing this out. So I've got some quick commands that you can run just to look into this. So for example, This JQ will just select any with the meta-caller ID create external cross-reference worker, and that will probably pull every single log you can dream of relating to the issue integration specifically. So some of the things you'll see straight away is we've got a HTTP error from Jira. It's returning a 404 error sending message. So keep in mind that this can be completely different depending on, the particular problem that's occurring. It could be permissions problems or anything else. But I'd like to highlight these three keys in particular. So we can see the actual Jira instance URL. We can see the path to the Atlassian Jira API. This is very important. We can also see the response we received from the Atlassian API. Now, why this is important, if we go and look at the Atlassian API really quick. So now, one thing to note is GitLab's code base uses version 2 of the Atlassian Jira API. The current version, I think, is REST v3. So just make sure that you're viewing the right API docs. But if we look at the Get issue and we look at the responses, here's the 404. And we have a description on why we're getting a 404. Returned if the issue is not found or if the user does not have permission to view it. So, I mean, we all know on the call right now that the issue doesn't exist. So that's the problem. But using this, looking at these things and then looking at the API documentation, it should rapidly help you figure out a customer's problem if you're really stuck. So that's how I troubleshoot the issue integration personally. Now, let's do a more involved one. So what if we simulate this? Now, just give me a moment because I actually need to set up a few things in the background. It should only take a moment. All right. Let's say we go into here. Let's do something else. Let's install the app from the beginning. And this is a different way to find the apps. You can just go through the marketplace directly and just search. Of course, make sure you select the official GitLab Jira Cloud app. There are other integrations that claim that they do the similar things, but they're not written by GitLab. So yeah, just be mindful of that. All right, get started. Now we'll just start from the beginning. Let's just clear everything. Change GitLab version. All right, let's grab this. All right, failed to update the GitLab instance. See the troubleshooting documentation. Now, if you have worked a GitLab for Jira Cloud app ticket, chances are you've seen this error at some point in your time. And this can be a bit of a confusing error to debug, especially if you're just starting off in this realm. So your friend is going to be the network tab to begin with. And what we can do is if we refresh the page and, I have to do all this again, hold on. Okay, so we can see we've got a 422 coming back, but I think what confuses a lot of people is the request is coming from gitlab.com. Now, why are we seeing that from gitlab.com if we have a self-managed install? And the reason is the Jira Connect proxy. So keep that in mind when you're debugging these problems. That, didn't mean to double click that. That, if the customer or user is using the Atlassian Marketplace install method, it will have to go through gitlab.com. If it's not going through gitlab.com, they've misconfigured something. But if it is going through gitlab.com and it's not working and it's responding with a 422, that means there's going to be an error in the Kibana logs. So we can have a quick look there. Some other things to note is the endpoint will return an error. We can see network error, which is definitely a very helpful error. But I personally would like to know why we're seeing that. So let's see if we can explore why. Okay, so let me just close some of these windows because I am confusing myself. And what we can do, GitLab Jira Connect, proxy debugging. So this is the link I was referring to earlier on in the deep dive. Now, Alexa,
On your calendar.
Alexa, please be quiet. Trying to be nice to Alexa. Okay, so we can see that we did configure the Jira Connect proxy to gitlab.com, if you recall earlier on. We're seeing this error. We are making a get request to gitlab.com installations. We are seeing a 422 error. So this is what a customer would see, what I've just demonstrated. And essentially, if a customer is very savvy, they're going to come across this and they'll already send this information, which is great. Otherwise, you'll have to request this information. So it's easiest to just ask them for their self-managed instance URL, and we can actually find the information quite quickly. Alternatively, if they have the correlation ID, that's very helpful as well. So since I actually have access to the correlation ID, I'm just going to use that for the next steps. So where is it? So scenario 2 is just the one that we were covering because we actually have an exception class and exception message. Now for scenario 1, Jira status code and Jira JSON body might contain the response from the self-managed or a proxy. So that would be, what I was talking about with Cloudflare, actually intercepting the message. And it's generally say something along the lines of, Cloudflare doesn't know this IP, it's not on the allowed list. So one of the prerequisites was actually adding gitlab.com IPs to whatever list that you might have. So yeah, I think ultimately when it comes to Jira Connect proxy issues, it's one of the prerequisites was overlooked. It's always been overlooked. There's always one thing that someone's overlooked. So that's one thing. The other thing to note is if it returns a 401 and the body is empty, the customer may not have put the Jira Connect proxy URL correctly, and it's not gitlab.com, or they may have a reverse proxy in the mix. Now, reverse proxies are a whole different kettle of fish. In all the reverse proxy tickets that I've seen, they are all slightly different. And if anyone here has worked one, you know that they can be a bit tricky as well. So I will actually point out we do have some example configuration for how you can configure a reverse proxy using an external Nginx. And we make it very clear that it's only supposed to be used to connect Jira Cloud for GitLab. It's not intended to be a solution for accessing GitLab with multiple external URLs. But yeah, I'm just sharing that just in case you see tickets relating to that, because we do get that quite a bit. Okay. I think that was all I really wanted to show there. The solution, of course, I could probably just quickly demonstrate. So let me just put the old cert back in, the let's encrypt. And what we want to do is let's just copy this, refresh this page. Okay, so I need to just do all this stuff again. Okay, notice it worked that time. No, I should probably click in all the way, eh? Okay, yeah, so that's all working. So yeah, definitely make sure your certs are publicly trusted. Alrighty. Okay, let's we've got some links here to talk about just rough troubleshooting. So we've gone through some of those in the demos just now. And we've got these respective pages for the different connection methods and of course the previously mentioned logs that you can look at. Now here is some useful commands that I've used, and I've already demonstrated this one, which can grab anything relating to the issue integration. The second one is just to test Jira credentials work, and you can actually access a Jira issue. That's quite helpful as well. And of course, this one is a Rails snippet. It actually lets you test if you can retrieve the Jira integration settings for a project, find a Jira issue, and then post a comment to the Jira issue. So because there are multiple steps going on there, it's really good for low-level debugging, tricky problems with that integration. Of course, with the Jira development panel, here is a nice ripgrep command that we'll also add to the docs after this to just rapidly find any logs related to the GitLab for Jira Cloud app. We've also got some JQ commands here for selecting anything with the module Jira Connect name. And of course, we've already briefly gone through the Jira Connect proxy issues documentation as well. Okay, wow, bang on time, actually. So yeah, thank you for everyone attending this deep dive presentation. It's definitely been good, I would say. Everything went well. All the demos went well. So I'm going to call that a success. And I know we are at time, but I'm happy to spend maybe a few moments going through the questions if there are any. So I'm just switching to the doc and I see we only have one question. Iris, did you want to vocalize your question?
Yeah, sure. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right question. Yeah, so my question is, what's the best search to use at GitLab if you're trying to search for Jira-related issues?
Did you want to chime in, Emily, or I can go on after you?
Yeah, so for me, I just go by the label. But these are usually known issues. But if there are like some users just creating issues, then they might not have the right labels. But that's generally how I search.
Yeah. Yeah, just to add to Emily's point, I mean, this is good too. I'm probably a bit more broader. I will use import and integrate just as a starting off, and then it really depends on the particular issue that you're looking for. You know, as you know, the trouble with issues is they are mislabeled or they're missing what you need. So sometimes it's better just to search for the group and the keywords that you're looking for. Yeah, but yeah, if you need to narrow it down, we've got so label is so using Emily's example. Sure. So we've got GitLab for Jira Cloud app. You also have the other one, issue integration. So you got that one. There should be one for the DVCS connector, I imagine. No? Well, those are the two main ones that you need to know of.
Yeah, the category integrations is also a good one too.
Oh, yeah, category integrations. Yes, it is. Yeah, this one here. Yeah. Does that help, Iris?
Yes, I'm trying to write them in the doc, but it might help if I missed one of them that you had an example. Oh, the labels is, yeah.
That's okay. We can go back and fill out the doc later.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? You don't have to write them in the doc. You can just verbalize them.
I have one other question. You briefly touched on the fact that Jira Server is going the way of the dodo on Jira's side.
Yes.
What is our scope of support in those instances? Like, we're supporting the plugin, but does it also, like, how far back would we go if they're using an outdated version of Jira?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I guess if Atlassian decide to pull the plug and not support Jira Server anymore, then we can't help them, right? Because it just no longer is an offering. But under the GitLab support policy, we have N+2 with major versions at the moment. So I might have to think on that because I want to be careful how I answer that question. But in general, we do have some deprecations with some of the older versions of GitLab where there used to be two different DVCS connectors, and one was deprecated in favor of the Atlassian provided one. So there will be cases where, depending on your version of GitLab, the DVCS connector just won't work, depending on what version of Jira Server you're operating. And eventually, it's going to get to a point where Jira Server is not available altogether. So,
yeah, because my understanding from looking at Atlassian's website is they're only doing like long-term exception support for Jira Server right now.
yeah.
So there shouldn't be that many people legally using it.
Yeah, there will be the one or two customers that are just holding on to it because they must have everything on-prem. So it will be around for a little while longer, but I imagine it's gonna eventually fizzle out.
Yeah, I'll link to the doc, but they're basically pushing everyone to the non-Jira server, whatever it's called.
Yep. Oh, Jira Cloud.
No. Yes, they're pushing them to Jira Cloud, but if they're not, then they recommend the data center.
Oh, okay. So they're not deprecating data center.
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Server licenses ended on February 15th.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
It's probably very obvious from how I'm answering that I don't deal with Jira Server very much. I've been exclusively mainly on Jira Cloud. But if Emily or David, if you have anything to add to that, please feel free.
Yeah, I think like even if they want to like completely go away from it, they still have to maintain the older version. So for trial, I could still get a trial license now, but I think you cannot buy a new one. I'm not sure. I think David and they don't sell the license anymore. You could renew something like that.
Okay, the license is a bit very expensive. I think they are trying to pull everyone from the data center to the cloud. Like now, you find that the license itself is quite expensive. I tried to get one yesterday, but it is very expensive to buy. So, but they have a trial license for 30 days. So if you want to test something, you can use that one. But most of everyone is moving to cloud. So I think in the near future, everyone will be in the cloud. Actually, I've not seen many tickets right now with data center solution, very few. But I think the direction for them is to move everyone to the cloud. Yeah.
Okay, so it might not even come up as an issue at any point.
Yeah, there's some of them who are having that. I'm actually supposed to do a video and recording on how to do the DVCS. I'll just do it probably within this week. It's still there because I've seen some other customers still using the GitHub, but it was deprecated. They have a set of new integration that we put there on the doc with Emily. So it's a bit more confusing than using the Jira Cloud. It's actually easy, but if the customer still insists on using the data centers solution, I'll try to make a video for that.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, David. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to speak on Emily's point with the demo licenses, while I remember, there is something that Jira calls a time bomb license. So if you ever need licenses, you can just grab them from here. Now, if you do install Jira Server or Data Center, I think it actually allows you to create a trial license. So you may not need these time bomb licenses, but I'll just provide a link just in case they are needed. Emily or David might have different experiences, but I know for me, if I've ever needed to use Jira Server, I've always used the Docker image. I've always found that much easier than trying to set up Jira, directly in the OS.
Yeah, well, I did do the direct setup in the OS in preparation for this. It is a pain, but I was able to just get a demo license for older server versions. It seems
cool.
to work like Emily said.
Awesome. Okay, I'll just pause for a little bit longer just in case anyone has any questions. Otherwise, we can wrap up. Okay. As you can see, I have a very hungry cat. So let's wrap up. Thank you everyone for attending. I hope you found this deep dive very helpful. If you have any feedback, I would love to hear it. Please feel free to share it in the Support Jira Deep Dive channel or chuck it in the meta issue. But yeah, hey, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your respective days. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ito.
See you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.